Hi, everybody. Georgia Musgrave here, and I am so excited to have Duffy Group be hosting today's Recruiter Table Talk for the month of September. We've got a lineup of a great panelists, and our topic here today is actually near and dear to my heart, and it's all for the recruiters out in our audience today, professional recruiters in industry who are looking at how do you keep your candidates in the pipeline engaged. So this is all about how to set your candidates up for success for that next job. And we know the impact of a recruiter or that recruiters have on a candidates is paramount. And so if you're working with a recruiter and you are a recruiter, this is I would say this is the table talk for you. So again, let's frame this conversation up around those in industry who want to learn more about the tips and tricks of keeping their active candidates engaged. And like I said, we've got a lineup here of panelists that are here to talk just about that. Before we get started, though, I do want to say that if you are a recruiter or if you've been in industry for a long time, if you work with firms, Duffy Group, just as a reminder to all of you, we are a slightly different firm than most out there in that we work specifically with passive talent. And so we're not necessarily going after active seekers, and it's not really a firm where candidates would want to apply to us for their next job. Instead, when we're going after the passive talent, we're going to eventually, with our clients, find the best talent for them. And you better believe that our recruiters are going to feverishly work with those candidates to prepare them for their interviews and how to show up in front of those hiring managers. So without further ado, I want to just briefly introduce the panelists that are with me today. I've got Sharon Grace, I've got Kristin Pozen, and Colleen Neese. Some of you may be familiar with them through our table talks of recent, but I'm grateful to have them because they're very busy. And so I was able to pull them away from their busy schedules. Now, the other piece before we get started, I want to share with you, we've got a gift to give away. If you want to stick around for the rest of our program here today, we will be sharing this QR code, which is up now. If you want to take a look at that, this will offer a Duffy Group prep guide, interview prep guide. So for those of you who want some takeaways, we'll have that for you as well. So without further ado, let's get started. Colleen, I'm going to start with you. You are a practice leader and have been a recruiter now for 25 years. When I look at your face, I find that shocking. So youthful. And I know that you in particular work with in multiple industries with, hundreds, if not thousands of candidates at different various levels of their employment. And you take a very personal approach when you are with those candidates. So tell me if you can kind of offer up your framework and how you work with candidates through their process. I would really appreciate that today, and so would the audience.
You bet. Well, thank you, Georgia, and thank you so much for your kind words. I knew I loved you. So yes, we work with a lot of candidates, and a big part of what we're doing is recruiting those candidates for the right opportunity. But let's say they've landed that interview with one of our clients. So one of the critical steps in the process then is ensuring that those candidates are as best prepared for that upcoming interview. And so, we're just big believers in actually preparing for an interview here versus winging it. I know there are some people out there that think that they can just wing an interview. However, we have found that the preparation that candidates do really does make a difference. And you're right, Georgia. We work with all levels in all industries, all operational areas. And I happen to specialize in working with a lot of C-level executives and specifically a lot of CEOs. And I'll tell you, they've got a lot more experience than I do as far as business experience. They've done recruiting and hiring. And so when I'm sharing with them tips for their interview prep, if you will, I'm not insulting them. I'm really just giving them a refresher because, like I said, they know more than I do about the business, but I'm just there to remind them to actually prepare for the interview. So I always have what we call an interview prep call or video. before the candidate goes into their interview with our client. And so during this time, I am there to remind them to, to really take some time to prepare. And I have found that, candidates tend to do a really good job when it comes to studying up on the company, reviewing the job summary. Those are all really important things, and we'll talk more about that. But I like to remind candidates to study up on themselves. And what I mean by that, just take some time to reflect on your resume, write down some of your great accomplishments and outcomes, because, the interview is not the place to just talk about what your responsibilities have been. The hiring leader, the recruiter, or the HR professional, they want to know more than just what you're responsible for. They want to know, how did you impact the business? And so you need to think about what have been some of your biggest accomplishments, and to quantify those results. And what I mean by that is using actual numbers to show what the change is, to what the impact the business has been. And so that's just a really important piece for candidates to do. And then, preparing for basic interview questions. They're going to ask you, what do you know about our company? They're going to ask you, why are you interested? They're going to ask you some real basic type of questions, some sort of question along the lines of your top skills, top accomplishments. And so it's really easy to prepare for those basic interview questions. You can even look on the internet and find a list of those and begin to prepare for those. So that's an important part of the process. But then also, I think it's important to prepare for what we call, and what the industry refers to as, behavioral interview questions. And so those can be a little trickier in that they're looking for more substance, more examples. And a behavioral interview question is going to be like a situational based type of question. And so if you're going to have an interview where there's behavioral interview questions being asked of you, you're going to do much better if you've taken time to think of different examples throughout your career. And then that way, when those types of questions come your way, you can, you're prepared to share those examples. So I think those are some of my top tips for a candidate, being prepared for an interview.
Wow, I love that. So you actually prep candidates before, you sit down with them and really prep them. That's okay. How long does that usually take? I'm just curious. 10 minutes, half hour?
Oh, that's a great question. So it does sometimes depend on the level. For example, some of my CEO searches, we might spend a good 30 minutes together on a video. Okay. And maybe some lower level positions, it could be, a 10, 15-minute phone call. So it really does depend on the needs. However, at the end of the day, the prep is really, I'm not giving them the answers. They're going to be their authentic selves and bring their experiences to the table. But it's a nice refresher. Even the most experienced executives oftentimes say, oh, thank you so much for reminding me of that.
Right. Because we don't often take a step back and look at our accomplishments. Exactly. We're so caught up in an interview. Excellent. Well, I have a question for you about those behavioral interviews. Can you give me an example? I know we talk a lot about them. Can you give us an example of what a behavioral interview question might be, or how a recruiter might position it with a candidate?
Sure. And they can be used in a number of ways. I mean, one that's really common that we use often is when we're talking about leadership and management style and conflict resolution. And so one of the go-to questions is, tell us about a time when you had a challenging situation with an employee. What was that situation? What did you do to address it? What was the outcome? And would you do things differently? And so you can see it's a multi-part question, but it's also calling for them to actually use a real example from their experiences.
Okay, excellent. Okay, great example. Thank you for that. Now,
Sure.
Kristin, your turn. I've always been so amazed at how you've engaged with candidates through your career. And you've always been great at explaining how they can expand on really setting themselves apart from other candidates, right? Because it's a competitive world. So I've especially loved your 15-minute rule, which is you can talk a little bit about that and how a candidate can prepare early for an interview. So talk about your coaching method, if you can.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And Colleen, thanks for sharing all that. I think, just to dovetail on what you were saying, we're not here to, we're women, so we're not here to mother our candidates. We're really here just to guide them. A lot of times candidates haven't interviewed in some time. Maybe they've been in their current role for 10 years and they're finally, making the leap to another company. So these things are forgotten, and some of it may sound basic, but it really isn't. And that STAR method you were talking about, in terms of behavioral interviewing, I think it's really important. I'm seeing a lot of that these days. But yeah, to answer your question further, Georgia, really what I like to do is make sure that for one thing, we know exactly when the interview is going to be. So I've communicated with my client, I've communicated with the candidate, everyone's on the same page with their calendar. I'm part of the calendar invite, so we know all the bases have been covered. Everyone has accepted the invitation. And if it's in person, I take it a step further and make sure that they know the exact address, if there's special places to park, special security instructions, go through all of that. And if at all possible, I encourage them to actually even try to drive to the location a day ahead of time, just so they can anticipate maybe there's a construction zone. It's going to delay them by, 10 minutes. And I always encourage our candidates to show up 15 minutes early for the interview, just to kind of avoid any of those, potential issues. If it's a Zoom interview, practice on Zoom with a friend if you've never done that before, or if it happens to be on Microsoft Teams, make sure you can get onto that easily. We think we're masters of all of this because of the COVID, because of going through COVID, but there's different technologies out there, and sometimes they're not as easy to maneuver. And especially you want to put your best foot forward, and that's really what this all is about. Something else I always do is I send the job description again. So we've presented them with that in the beginning of the interview process with Duffy Group, but I give it to them again to remind them, hey, read it over one more time, highlight important things in here. Maybe there's some questions that you can develop based on the job description to ask the client. And then I always encourage them to do more research on the company and the industry. Also finding out who's on the interview panel. I don't, we operate very transparently. So I want to make sure my candidate's set up for success. I also want to make sure my client is. So I find out who's going to be on that interview panel. I pull all of their LinkedIn profiles. If I have any biographies, I share all of that with my candidate. So I do the legwork because I'm going to end up sharing it with the other candidates we present as well. But then that gives them a better understanding of really what the org chart looks like around this position and the team that they're interviewing with.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then even, and so then after that interview is complete, I make sure that I've scheduled a debrief call with them 24 hours after the interview. So, they may call me right after, but within 24 hours, I want to find out, okay, how did it go? Where do you think you excelled? Where do you think you might have, had a misstep? Possibly, did anything happen that I need to know about? And then I also do the same thing with my client. And then I share some of that feedback with each other, as it's appropriate. But I want to make sure my client didn't mess up on something, right? Like nobody showed up to the Zoom call. I certainly don't want that to happen
Does
again.
That happen?
Maybe.
It can happen on this day.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's multiple client interviews. So that's, that can be kind of exhausting. I think Sharon may have some more information about that, but having to repeat this process really each time, making sure that we're staying in contact through all of the different steps of the interview process, even the background and the reference checks. We're here to get them all the way to the offer stage, and I think any recruiter out there, is doing their job if they can keep the candidate engaged all the way to that offer stage. And then one last thing I always Duffy Group does as a whole is we help to pre-negotiate the offer. So the client knows how to make the best possible offer the first time to the candidate. So we fully understand where our candidate's comp lies today, what their expectations are for this position, and we match up both of those together and present it to the client so that they, within their budget, can help to expedite the whole offer acceptance process, and it goes a lot more smoothly.
Excellent tips. Okay, so I have a question for you because, let's face it, we've all been interviewed before. How much, when you talk about a candidate doing their research, understanding who'll be interviewing them, looking them up, understanding the org chart, is that really the role of a candidate to do? Are they in the driver's seat that way, or is this the job of the recruiter to help prepare the candidate? Tell me more about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I think maybe for a corporate recruiter, maybe they might not do all of that legwork. But if they want to continue taking forever to get a position filled, I think it does make it move along a little bit more quickly if you're setting up that candidate for success, right? So our job is we work with hiring leaders, with companies. So we want our candidates to be armed with that information. And unless it's like a confidential placement, which we do get those as well, we'll keep everything confidential up to a point, and we'll agree to what that point is with the client. Is it the in-person interview? Maybe they can still do a phone call interview and still keep it confidential. But really knowing who the players are and what they do will better equip the candidate. Like, for example, let's say it's for a chief operating officer position. Knowing that the CFO of the company might be on the interview panel makes the candidate think, gosh, there's somebody who's pretty smart about finance and accounting that's going to be on this call. I better be prepared to answer questions that might be coming from a CFO. And maybe I might better need to understand, what's going on in the industry in terms of finance and accounting for this company. So that's just, an example to share.
Okay, that makes great sense, obviously. So, all right, Sharon, now you and I have we've worked together now for many, many years. And I've always enjoyed working with you, especially in the accounting space, nonprofit, and higher ed. You do an amazing job. And I know you do a lot of work and your recruiters do too, with the candidates. You and I were chatting not too long ago, and you talked about how, the processes are changing. And you're seeing a change, and how does a recruiter, with the changes going on, whether it's the technology people are using or the competition that's out there in this market, how do you prepare your candidates?
Yeah, great. No, thanks, Georgia. And I'm following some great advice here from my peers, Colleen and Kristin. And maybe a quick little add-on is just a term that we think of as teamwork. So, and we want to streamline the process. So it's a team that a recruiter has, and that consists of working with the client, the hiring leader, and also the candidate, and how the thread goes in between all three. And we want to keep that streamlined. One thing I want to just do a quick add-on with what Kristin was sharing is something that I used to really enjoy. And when I did a lot of local searches for preparing the candidate for the interview, I went a step further with having them, as Kristin stated, arriving early. Well, I would be there too. So I would meet them in the lobby and then just go over any last minute questions, calm any nerves, whatever, and do the introduction to the hiring leader. And that was pretty impactful.
Nice touch.
Yeah. All right. Now the market's changed. I think we're all noticing this, and we've just coming off of the past couple of years where things were moving quite quickly, and the interview processes were streamlined in a lot of cases to perhaps sometimes just that one, so a one and done. Now, not so much. There's different factors going on. There's more candidates in the marketplace. Those that have sat back in the past couple of years are starting to re-enter as well. Budgets are tight in some cases, depending on the industry. And maybe they're not sure if they need to bring someone on today. So we want to always put our best foot forward anyway. So this may mean a little bit more work on the candidate. And if you are working with a recruiter, and for recruiters with your candidates, let's work together and bring that teamwork in and to help keep this process going, because the goal is to get the interview, right? Get that first interview, get the second interview, and get the third. And if there's a committee that you're meeting with, but know that up front. So in the beginning, in most cases still, if it's a in-office position or hybrid, that first interview still will be in a virtual setting, so video. So we're all pretty experienced by now on video. However, still double check. I would like to recommend to get onto your own video app prior to and practice. Make sure the lighting is good. Make sure your background is good. Are you positioned correctly? Turn off all of your distractors. Shut down your emails. Turn off your phone. Anything else? Close your door. It sounds simple, but we're just busy and moving fast, and things like that can move away. Mm-hmm. Now, moving into how do we look? So just as an extension of that, I like to talk about wardrobe, and I'm not saying to go out and spend a lot of money on a new outfit, but put some time and effort into how you look, because dressing for the day and for a special occasion, for an event, we want to feel good. And that's part of preparing for an interview, is wearing something that you feel confident in, because we want to be confident. What are you comfortable in? Are you wearing something? Fit is important, and color, and professional. I was actually just speaking with a new client recently, and we were discussing the interview process. And an important point that they brought up with me is that they're a casual and laid back environment. And for candidates that are used to wearing a suit or dressing up every day, and there are still a lot of cultures that do have that this is a type of culture that wouldn't be the fit for them. So that's something that I would like to make sure that is being included when preparing this candidate for that. However, knowing that you're interviewing in a more casual or laid back environment does not mean that you can relax your attire. You still, even if the hiring leader, and it may be the CEO, C-level role, may be a little bit more in the casual, prepared, put together, but more in that business casual, is not wearing a suit. Does not give you the okay to not dress in interview attire. So please, please, always you get one chance for first impression, put your best foot forward and dress in the interview attire and throughout. Okay, and then clothes. So we want to ask for the job. So now, even if it's in the video, your background looks good, you're wearing the right outfit, you're sounding good, you did all of your homework. Now it's that interview, you hope that it'll be more of a conversational that the conversation just flows, but don't get too comfortable because you're still in the interview. And don't make an assumption that I am the right fit. And I think they see that. We want to ask for the job, ask for what is the next step. Tell them that you're interested. Tell them why that you are interested. Think of some of the things that were discussed that really resonate with you, where you feel you are spot on with that. And you want to make sure that they understand that too. They want to see that you're interested and excited. So, and ask for the next step of what the interview process is.
The fact that you said you would greet the candidates and introduce them to the hiring manager, I think is a great tip. I mean, if a recruiter has the opportunity to do that, what a great tip, right? How personable can you be? And obviously that's how you work, Sharon, very personalized. So I appreciate the tips. Thanks for sharing that. I think obviously you've shared a lot, and we're going to summarize some of this at the end. But before we get there, we've got some great questions from the audience that I'd like to go ahead and share with each of you, and let me know who wants to take it. But the first question I have is, how does a candidate properly end the interview? So recruiter wants to know, how do they prepare a candidate for properly ending the interview if they're uncomfortable with that? Would you shake hands, say thanks a lot, see you later?
Sure. I'll take that. I think Sharon just did a great job of really, explaining some of that. But I think in just a quick summary, for me, it's all about, two things: restating your interest, and then asking about next steps. And so, the asking about next steps, that would be, if it's like a first round interview. However, Sharon was just talking about how you want to ask for the job. That's an appropriate way to end the interview. So you really just want to make sure that you're professional. I mean, you want to, shake hands and thank them for their time. But again, it's all about reiterating your interest and asking for that job, or asking for the next steps in the process. And even in our interview prep guide, we give the suggestion of some good closing questions to use along those lines.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Next question. Again, tell me who wants to take it. What if the candidate is interested to know about salary? Now, this is an interesting question. Is it okay to ask questions regarding salary during an interview? Who wants to take that on?
I can take it. I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I kind of touched on this before. The way Duffy goes about it, like, this shouldn't even occur when you're our candidate, because we'll have already, vetted you out. We know you're in the right range, but there are still some hiring leaders out there, recruiters, that they kind of keep the compensation a mystery, and still are able to get people into an interview, and the candidate still doesn't know what they're going to get paid. So I think it is appropriate to say, hey, I don't want to waste anybody's time here, and maybe even do it before you get that interview scheduled, and say, here's the range I'm looking for. This is what I feel like is fair for the position. Does that align with what the position is paying? Because if it doesn't, then everyone's wasting their time. Some people will say, oh, well, I want to get in there and just really show who I am, and they're going to love me. And even if the range is lower than what I want, like, they'll give me more money. That rarely happens. Wouldn't you agree, team?
Yes, there are budgets. There are budgets and constraints.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe there is, some slight wiggle room, but when we're talking about, like a $10,000, $20,000 difference, like, it's just not going to happen.
Okay. All right. Excellent.
Maybe a turnoff.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So here's another, I think this is the last question we'll be able to cover today in this session. How does a recruiter then keep their candidates engaged during sometime what seems to be a long hiring process? And I know I know that that can happen, right? Where the process takes a while. How can a recruiter keep those top candidates engaged? Sharon, do you want to take that?
I'll take that. Sure thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's hard, especially sometimes a candidate may have other opportunities that are coming up. I'd say just stay in that communication. We do like to tell our candidates too, to if something changes, for them to let us know. But we want to keep them engaged and be transparent. So the more information that the recruiter can get from their hiring leader, maybe there are vacations, maybe something has changed with the position that they don't know, whatever the case may be, or someone had a medical emergency and needed to leave earlier than anticipated. Things do come up and have been more often. And so, I really just keep it with the transparency, that we're not hiding anything and letting them know that we really don't. But it's a balancing act too, I will say, because we don't want it to be a turnoff to the candidate, because sometimes they may feel, wow, if this is how the long process in making a decision, is this what it's going to be like when I get there? And letting the client know of things like that too, of the message that you may be sending to the candidate that may bring some concern to them. So it's a two-way street. And again, back to the teamwork.
Excellent. And how many candidates have I talked to? And I remember, I think we've all applied for jobs in our career, right? And we never heard anything. Mm-hmm. And that just sets such a bad example. So I think, shouting out to all the recruiters out there, the value of communication, transparency, things do happen. There's multiple people, stakeholders in the process, and keeping those candidates aware helps keep them engaged. So thanks for that. Well, all right. So we're going to close this recruiting table talk out today. I want to just, again, get the QR code out there in front of any recruiter who would like a prep guide. This is yours for the taking today. And anyone else that might be out there find these tips on value add to you. So feel free to get that QR code. And I guess in summary, I want to just thank the panel today for all of the helpful advice. And just from the beginning, when you think about setting your candidate up for success, getting them to take a step back, assess those accomplishments, understand how they can be qualified and quantifiable in terms of, and the importance of behavioral interviews and preparing for those behavioral interviews are huge to their success. Very, very powerful takeaway. And Kristin, I love the fact that, as a recruiter, you're not mothers, but it is important. It's very important to remind those candidates of the details, because a candidate might, especially in our world, are probably already working. They've got multiple things going on. There's a level of stress to an interview. So just reminding of them, look at that job description. Remember the time of that interview. Come 15 minutes early. And all those details really do matter. And the fact you walk them through that and you're patient enough to do that shows that while you're not a mother, you care greatly about your candidates. And then I think in overall too, Sharon, you pointed out the competition. The competition is fierce today. And I guess it's always been, let's face it. And especially for those dream jobs, right? So it's important to set yourself up, those candidates, to differentiate themselves in the process. That first impression is huge, and reminding them of dress, attire, just their body language, and how they position themselves in the interview is huge. So I want to thank all of you today. I hope people in the audience wrote those notes down and find this to be valuable today. Please be sure, if this was a value add to you, those of you in the audience, to share our table talks with others in your network. Feel free to follow Duffy Group on social media and LinkedIn. We're so grateful to have you and to be a part of this community. That ends this September's Recruiter Table Talk. Until then, you take care, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.